Hey everybody, Joe here. I'm back again, and this time around, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this little guy right here, the Retrobit Generations console. I have finally gotten some time to sit down and play it, not as much as I would like, but I feel just enough to give first impressions. And before I get into the meat and potatoes, I'm going to talk a little bit about this controller right here. I'm actually a little bit surprised. I was expecting it to be horrible, unusable, like the Genesis controllers that they put out years ago. Honestly, this is a bit of a step up from them. Buttons aren't as squishy. It actually feels kind of decent. Still a little too small for my hands, and I don't have the biggest hands, so that's kind of a surprise. But they are somewhat usable. Probably a bit better if this was being played by a kid or something like that. But these, okay, if those old Genesis controllers they made were like a 1.5 or a 2 out of 5, these are probably like more of a 3.5. Not awesome, but not terrible. I've heard people say that they're still not the best quality, but so far, so good. But I really only had like an hour and a half of play on them so far, so you really can't say too much. Now let's get into the games a little bit. Pretty much everything I played looked good, barring some graphical wonkiness. But you know what? It's emulation. Sometimes that's what you get. It can still be kind of a crapshoot, even though it's come a hell of a long way with devices like the Retron 5, Retro Freak, Raspberry Pis that you can hack and whatever. They tried to do a lot with a little on this and keep it cheap. And so, like I said, that's what you get sometimes. Some of the games, the music it's the original music, but it's off a bit. It's like the version of Legend on here, for some reason, the music is just, I don't know what the hell happened. It just sounds horrible. I know I've played a different ROM of Legend that had much more pleasing to the ears sounds. Some of the games just did have some graphical weirdness to them. I probably going to be putting up a clip of Astyanax and the flashing, which looked a little weird because it went a little longer. You know how you get invulnerability boost and whatnot in games after you take a hit, and it looked a little off. And there are other glitchiness, but that's just one of the ones that I personally found. And I've heard of there's games on here which might not have the original audio to them, and maybe with licensing or whatnot, that's some of it. Or it could just be really distorted from the emulation. Again, not all emulation's perfect. That's what you get sometimes. So I could look past some of this. Certain things are a little weird. Holy Diver seemed to play a little fast to me. I don't know if it's just it's been a long time since I've played it, but it just seemed a bit off. And then like 1942, 1943, they seemed a little slow. Again, emulation. Sometimes that's what you get. Since I'm mentioning some of these game titles, the content on here, their choice of games, I didn't really go into too much detail about that, talking about what's on here in the previous video. So let's do a little bit of that now. I'm not going to run down the whole thing, but I mentioned 1942 and 1943, Bionic Commando, Super Ghouls and Ghosts. There are some neat titles on here, a very interesting selection. Import game stuff we never got on these shores officially until this, which is kind of cool. And yes, a lot of these are arcade games, but they're home ports of the arcade games. Like, you'll get the NES version of this, you get the Super Nintendo version of that, you might even get the Genesis or even Game Boy versions of some of these games. The only one that I saw that had the original arcade version was Knights of the Round, which, as you may already know, that's a game that I really, really enjoy, so that's very cool. I'm very appreciative that they put the arcade version. Not saying the Super Nintendo version's bad, it's actually really good. It's a surprisingly faithful port, if not a little slow, and changed a little bit of the controls up. Still, fairly pleased with the inclusion. I know this really only scratches the surface of what's on here and what this thing does and what it doesn't do and how it does it, but like I said, I didn't really spend all that much time with it yet. But if you really want to see a full-fledged review of this thing, come back next weekend. By then, I'm sure I'll put a lot more time in with this. So, until then, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. Greatly appreciate it if you do. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Take care.